Hello, everybody. Welcome to Compute 470 Fall 2021, or I guess as you'll see me a little more often, a little bit like this. My name's Greg Baker. I'm the course instructor, and I guess as you can tell, you found this lecture. I'm doing lectures online this semester, and well, we'll talk about that. Let's come into the course here. So I guess presumably you know what this course is. It's web-based information systems. I think that's a good name. It reasonably well reflects, sort of what I will cover in the course. There's a course homepage in this sort of obvious place in courses. Maybe I'll keep that open. And then the lecture slides that I'm using here are linked there. Like this is exactly what I have open in this tab. There's no secrets here. I am currently in the course introduction. So my plan for this semester, officially this is an in-person course. I thought about it. I've decided to do the lectures this way, to deliver the lectures online, for a few reasons. I think honestly the biggest reason, it worked. I've taught this course online, when I had no other option, and I think it worked pretty well. I think this is at least as good, if not a better way to deliver lectures. It's not a course where there's a lot of sort of discussion in class. It's a little bit more, presentation of the material. The lecture works as a video. You can watch it online, as I suspect you are right now. You can rewatch it if you want to. Why would I do anything else? The other reason, if I'm honest, is a certain amount of risk aversion. I don't want to get sick. I don't want you to get sick. If there's a COVID outbreak that runs through campus, I don't want you to get sick. I certainly don't want you to get sick and have that be my fault. So I think there is a certain risk aversion, I think, among university faculty members, and I'm going with it. I'm going to steer into that feeling. So mostly online this semester. I can't promise exclusively online. We are officially an in-person offering. There may be in-person stuff to do, but I don't know what that would be as of right now. Let's put it that way. Well, again, obviously you have figured this part out because you're watching me as a video right now. Depending how you're watching this, during the lecture time, Tuesday at whatever time that is, these videos will premiere. So there will be a sort of initial, presentation of the video that is synchronous. So if you want this to be a synchronous course, sure, watch it during the lecture time. We'll all watch at the same time. So premiere is synchronized, so everybody's watching together. If you are watching it live, like wherever the YouTube chat is, or like wherever the live chat is, I will be there. Presumably I've said hello already in there. So if you want to ask questions as part of the lecture, you're welcome to do so. Of course, pre-recorded me can't stop. Like pre-recorded me is going to keep talking because I don't know what questions you're going to ask a week from now when this video premieres. But there is that chance for interaction if you want to. Again, if you want to treat it like a synchronous offering or a synchronous lecture, or if you want to treat it like an asynchronous lecture, after a premiere, the YouTube video just becomes a video and you can watch it like any other video, or if you want to rewatch or whatever. Again, I have really enjoyed the flexibility that this allows, sort of both from me and you. And I've had good feedback, honestly, from the students on this style of delivering a lecture as well. So like I said, I'm going to go with it. If it works, I'm going to go. Other sort of interactions that we may have with each other, discussion forum. So one thing that definitely does get lost, I guess, is this chance to ask, this sort of informal question, coming up after lecture and asking something. It's hard in the YouTube chat during the lecture. It's easy to get a quick question out of the way to say, oh, does it also apply to this? Or, oh, can I do it this way as well? Or whatever. Any sort of longer form question, if you have a question that's like, oh, on the assignment, how should I approach the thing? that's really hard to do in a YouTube live chat. Discussion forum is better for that. There's new discussion functionality in courses that we'll be trying out. Hopefully it works for everybody. I think it should be good. Office hours. This is one I did, honestly. I thought, I went back and forth in my own mind about how to do office hours. I could do office hours in my office. I could do office hours by video chat. I talked to a few students about it, sort of, let's say, very informal focus groups. Opinions were mixed. Some people would much rather do office hours in person. Some people said, look, I'm going to have one question. I don't want to commute all the way to campus to ask you a 30-second question. And I thought, yeah, that does make sense to me. So at least for the moment, the TAs and I will be doing office hours by video chat. If we need to meet in person, like if there is a need for just something where video chat doesn't work, it just doesn't make sense to interact that way, we can talk about, we can schedule a time. If you want to talk and meet with me, I'm happy to. I guess maybe the theme here is I'm trying to figure out what's the least friction way to offer this course is, and I think this is it. I'm not going to promise I won't change any of these things, but this is my plan. And, I do have some experience with this. So for you, again, you can treat this like an on-campus course. You can go to the Cecil Lab if you want, if that's a more sort of convenient, workable way for you to just do the work in the course. Great, go to Cecil, fine by me. Or connect remotely to Cecil if you're willing to. I mean, as you know, like if you've been taking classes in the last semester or two, we have a very aggressive firewall on campus now, which I guess is probably good, but it means that remote access is a bit of a pain. If you've worked it out and it works for you, that's cool. Go for it. If you want to do all your work at home or, on your own terms, also fine. There's no software in Cecil that will, that is in any way unique. You can do all of this on your own computer. I don't know that you're going, like I said here, powerful enough to run a virtual machine. I don't know that you're going to run a virtual machine, but I thought that was a fairly descriptive thing for me to say, I guess. Like I think if I say that, you know what that means. But a computer that's not too horrible should get you by. Okay, so hi. I mean, I guess I already introduced myself, but yeah, my name's Greg. I have been teaching this course for a good long time now. I don't know what else to say. I've been around SFU for a while as well. I'll have some office hours Thursday, midday. I will, like I said, so Zoom chat. And by the way, there is, if you have a look at the course homepage here, in the secret links section, there's a link to the Zoom, whatever, the Zoom password or whatever it is there. And then I'll keep an eye. I'll keep an eye on the discussion forum in general, but especially during my office hours, I'll watch it. The TAs, actually, there's two of them. One of whom just sort of signed up just before, and I didn't update the slides yet. There are two TAs. They will have some office hours. I'll post them here, and we'll announce as well, like in the, I suppose, in the discussion forum. Maybe by email as well. So, and I will, by the way, speaking of, I guess, communication with us, I will post sort of non-critical things in the discussion forum if there's just like, oh, here's something interesting. If there's anything, particularly critical, I'll send to the course email list. So, keep an eye on your SFU email, but I don't think that's a surprise for anybody. Okay, the course. These are the sort of main topics for the course. It's very much web development. Very much, certainly I focus on more on server side than client side in this course. Partially that's my own interest. Partially that's, client side programming is awesome. Server side programming is unavoidable. So we'll start today with just a basic tool, the tools that make the web. The markup language for content and the style language for appearance. We'll talk about, again, we'll get sort of partway through those today. Moving on to talk about the protocol, HTTP, which is not, the details of HTTP are not something I'm super excited about, but there are more cool tricks in HTTP than most people know, and even most web developers know. If you know about those, it will make you a better web developer. So I'll talk about some of the things that this underlying protocol can do. And I guess if you don't know about HTTP, it's the protocol that is the web. Saying something is on the web is synonymous with saying can be accessed with an HTTP request. So the things that make that run are the server side and the client side. Web client being this thing that we probably think of as a web browser, servers being, of course, the other end of that. Code can run in either one of those spots. Like I said, I will talk much more about the development that happens on the server. Of course, you need this, right? So the server is where any sort of persistence is going to happen if you're going to store data. If you're going to do any kind of authentication, it absolutely has to happen on the server. Any sort of access control has to happen where you, the developer, are fully in control. And then code that runs in the browser, JavaScript, and including things like, all the frameworks, React and Vue and these kinds of things, are also, in the spectrum somewhere with HTTP in between the two. We'll talk about security. Security is, I guess, unavoidable in this context. So if you're writing just sort of desktop software, maybe the security implications aren't as noticeable or aren't as critical. As soon as you put something on the web, anybody that can speak to your server with HTTP can access your application. Well, now there's the moment you do that, there's big security questions, and you'd better be equipped for that. It's not an optional thing in this context. And then the frameworks and tools, it turns out like for all of these things, there are problems that all of us are going to have. Everyone who's doing web development is going to have to do, this collection of things on the server, this collection of things on the client, or if not everybody, most or many. So there's a lot of tools that sort of rest on top of these basic technologies, right? So when I say, well, there's HTTP and there's a web server and there's a client, a web browser that can execute JavaScript code, that's the sort of basic technology question. But then how do we work with it is this huge collection of topics and huge, nightmare to open up if you really want to start learning it. More than can possibly be talked about in a single course, but we'll see some a bit of a survey there at least. Okay, the numbers at hand. There are almost weekly exercises. Those are, here. It's basically every Friday, starting. When does this lecture go? Anyway, starting the second Friday of the semester. That's either this Friday or next Friday, depending when this lecture is for. I don't even know what day it is now. I guess it's next Friday. But anyway, September 24th, the first exercise is due, and then basically, every week after that. Exercise 11 doesn't really exist. I'll delete that link. So those are basically 10 times 2% individual, get the basics out of the way. The technology evaluation that I'll talk about in a minute here is 25% of the course. Mostly it's group work, and the project is 55%. Again, mostly group work. So those weekly exercises are, in my mind, an excuse to sort of force you to practice the thing. Like whatever the thing is we've been talking about, it's to make you see some of those underlying details, or actually practice or see things that I don't think you'll get from the lecture if you just sort of watch the lecture. Get your hands on the keyboard and try it. Or there's a few of the exercises that sort of work into the project. So a little bit where I want all of you to see some basics of your framework or how deployment works, those sorts of things, and that will ladder you into what has to be done for the final project. The middle part of the course is sort of dominated by this technology evaluation. Again, mostly in groups. Well, like I said, when I was talking about these frameworks and tools and stuff back here, there's a lot of these, and there's just so many of them that I can't keep track of them. Like, I know a few of them okay, but it's not realistically possible for any one human to know all of these things or to keep up to date on the latest developments or whatever else in all of these different technologies. So what's going to happen here is each group gets a technology. So there's a selection process there. You can choose within reason, but I'll make sure each group has a different technology. And of course, the thing that you're going to see the most of is each group will give a presentation. So those will, again, weeks sort of 6 to 8 range of the course will be these presentations, which I guess for you, the presenter, will be a chance to sort of talk about the technology that you have chosen as a group. What's it about? What's it good at? What's it bad at? That kind of thing. And as a viewer, it becomes a survey of, here are a bunch of technologies. Why would I choose one? Why would I choose this one? Why would I choose that one? What's it good at? What, if I have some problem in mind, or I'm starting up a new project or something, how do I choose? What kind of criteria can I use? What do I look for in these various things? And then a few marks of basically this is me bribing you to actually watch these presentations. This is my plan for the presentation. So when teaching this course in the before times on campus, the presentation was a presentation. Your group stands up in front of the room and people watch and you talk about the thing. When I did this online, again, this is another example of I adapted to teaching this course online, and I think I accidentally found something that worked better than what I was doing before. So you get about 20 minutes, and rather than doing it in person and everybody comes up to the room and hooks their laptop up and realizes their laptop doesn't want to talk to the projector and then spends 5 minutes with display adapters and video card settings, instead, each of you at some point makes a video describing the thing. I'm not looking for special effects here. I'm looking for a video with good content. We should be able to understand it. We should be able to hear you. If you don't have a good microphone, get a microphone. You don't have to get it from this course, but you need a good microphone. It's 2021. The talking into your computer is not going to go away. And then I will take those videos. So there will be some due date for those videos, like probably 4 or 5 days before. I will ask, I need your video by this day. I will concatenate them effectively, and that will be the lecture for the week. Like I said, each group will have a different topic. So there is, why did I close that tab? Oh, that's not it. I got to delete that. That's from last semester. So there's a bunch of topic choices on the website, and this is not meant to be sort of definitive and exhaustive, but these kinds of things are the things I might talk about. So I suspect that Ruby on Rails is probably still popular enough that some group will want to talk about Ruby on Rails. It will become one of the things. So you'll get 20 minutes on that. Or if that's your group, you will give 20 minutes on that. And the front-end frameworks as well. Somebody will want to talk about Vue.js. If you don't know what that is, well, you're going to get an intro from your classmates at some point. So that choice, because there's a bit of a runoff going on here, I do want each group to have a different topic just for variety in the presentations. This topic choice for the technology evaluation is like the first thing that groups have to do. And I guess I'll talk about groups in a minute here, actually. As that finishes up, the latter sort of third or so of the semester, half of the semester, is dominated by the project. So this is basically make a web thing is probably the short and incomplete description of what this project is all about. I will by that point have been talking about stuff for 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks. Hopefully you've learned those things. Hopefully you've learned something from the weekly exercises and the course up to that point. Make a thing. You don't have to use the same technology. So back here, and by the way, in the technology evaluation, it's perfectly reasonable. Okay, I'm going to close my eyes and scroll randomly. Okay, Flask. It's perfectly reasonable to look at Flask and think Flask is great. Here's why everything is wonderful. It's also perfectly reasonable to look at it and say, we really didn't like it, and here's why. Both of those are reasonable ways to sort of conclude your evaluation of this technology. Maybe it's something you want to warn your classmates to not use. That's it's probably not the conclude. I would probably conclude Flask is pretty good, but hey, depending on the technology, depending on the group. So you can decide to switch, right? So there's nothing that says if you're doing Flask as the technology evaluation, there's no reason that you have to do it for the project. You could, but you don't have to. And there is it's a group project, but there is a weighting factor on that. It's not necessarily the case that every group member gets the same mark. So for the project, there's a proposal that I'll have you do sort of mid-semester. That's a chance for you to get your thoughts together as a group and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to implement this, this, and this. And it's a chance for me to give a little feedback and say, you're never going to get that done. You need to prune some features, or that's not a very good project. You need to think bigger. That's frankly going to be the kind of feedback I give in the proposal. In my feedback, basically what I'm trying to do is guide you towards a good project that can get you a good mark. Sort of, I don't know, week 10 or so, somewhere in there, there's a checkpoint implementation. Just again, I want to see that you're progressing on the project, that you're heading towards a good project and a good mark. And then the final implementation, which is exactly what it sounds like. And then there's an overview. What are the details on that? So the bulk of the marks by far are in the final implementation. And then an individual overview, a chance for you to individually think, well, okay, here's what we did. If we had more time, we would have done that. Here's what worked. We used Flask, but in the future, I might choose something else for my next project, that kind of reflection. Okay, I've said group a couple of times here, several times. So 4 to 6 people in a group, larger than that, there starts to be a lot of problems of coordination. Obviously, I think that's a good size for this course. And frankly, it's big enough that you can get something done. Your group project the final project should be kind of appropriate to the size of the group. 4th year course times about half the course marks times 4, 5, 6 people. It should be kind of that big a project, which is frankly bigger than I find a lot of people say when they propose their initial project idea. I will have a thread in the discussion forum. Hopefully I remember to create that between now and then. If you want to sort of discuss groups, or, say, the two of us are looking for 2 more group members or that kind of thing, we can have some discussion about that. The groups need to be formed fairly soon, within the next 2 weeks or so. If you're not in a group by whatever date, I'll send an email out with a deadline of like, all groups must be formed by this day. If not, whoever's sort of not in a group at that point, I will aggregate into groups. So like I said, the first task for a group, I know people want to start thinking about the project. Don't. The first thing you should do as a group once you get one is not that page. Why do I keep? Okay. Is just sort of look down this list of tech eval topics and think, okay, well, what do we want to do? And the sort of the way I will have you choose topics here is that you give me an unordered list. You say, like, this one is our most preferred, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then that. Give me a list. I will choose the first topic on your list that hasn't been chosen by a group that presents earlier than you. So, the group that presents first has, I guess, for your choice. The group that presents last, I guess, has more time to work on the presentation, but maybe has a more restricted choice on their topic because other people may have taken the one they want. Experience tells me that a list of like 4 or 5 or 6 topics here is fine. I know that when you look at this list, you think, oh my God, everybody's going to want to do my favorite thing. Obviously, this is the cool one. Everybody's going to want to do it. Well, it turns out you all have different ideas about what the cool one is, and it tends to work itself out pretty well. For this course, we have the computer science GitLab server that's there. I expect you to commit your own work. One, because that's how you use a version control system. And the other one is because, of course, I have to assign you a mark. I want to see the work that you did individually, because maybe there's a group project, but the final mark in the course is individual. And I do need to be able to assign that. So you commit your own work. That's I don't think an unreasonable requirement. Okay, when it comes time for the project, the deployment, like we need some way to sort of reasonably deploy the code, right? So you and all of your group mates can have your own sort of development system where you're working on the code, and also so the TAs and I can bring up your system and try it and see how it works. So I'm expecting a sort of, I don't know, DevOps style of thing here where your code knows how to bring itself into life. There's 2 options for that. And I think these are the 2 sort of reasonable ways to approach this problem. One is that your system runs on a virtual machine, and Vagrant is a tool to manage virtual machines where you can say things like, okay, I need a virtual machine. It needs this much RAM and this much CPU and a disk, that sort of thing. And then Chef is a configuration management tool that will, where you can sort of take that virtual machine and say things like, okay, well, I need this web server installed, and I need this development or this programming language environment installed, and I need this library that my code depends on installed, to set up the VM in a sort of, reliable, repeatable way that you can, well, you and your group mates and I can all work with and see things run. Or Docker is the container, I guess, equivalent of all that. A container is, I don't know what a container, I have no idea what a container is. It's something smaller than a virtual machine. It's an isolated environment that feels like it has its own operating system, but is running at sort of a little bit more dependent on your computer's operating system. So it's much quicker to sort of create and destroy these things. They're smaller, they're lighter in terms of resource utilization, but you probably have a lot of them. You'll probably have many containers that do things like database and application and front-end web server. So Docker is a system for those that, again, where you can say, I guess in Docker Compose, you can say, I need this collection of containers. And then Docker, or in a Docker file, you say things like, I need this library installed, or I need this package installed in the operating system. So if you worked with those before, that's great. If you haven't, there's some exercises. Where do they start? About exercise 4, to sort of ladder you into that. Some basics of, whichever one you and your group choose, where you can sort of start experimenting, see how things work, do some smaller exercises before you have to tackle the whole project. Okay, looking back at the marks for this course. There's a reason the final implementation is the big chunk of marks. That's the place that I see that you have actually, demonstrated that you've learned the appropriate lessons from the course. But it's a group project. So I have this problem that is always a problem whenever there's a group project. I need each one of you to demonstrate that you know how to do the basic thing that this course is about. And what that means is I expect that you will have a program, will have implemented part of the project. And I don't know why I don't know why I say this every semester. And for every semester, there's a certain fraction of the class where it doesn't seem to be meaningful. I have access to your version control. I know exactly what each group member contributed and when. I have no problem. And in fact, it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's a service to everyone else in the course. If you don't do the work in this course, you don't pass the course. That's it. Frankly, if you're someone who has a history of treating group projects as a thing where I think my group will do it and I don't have to worry about it, I'll just take whatever mark they get, drop the course now. There's a waiting list. Let people on the waiting list who are actually going to do the work into the course. Again, if you get a mark in this course and you pass this course, I want that to mean something. And if you don't demonstrate to me that you know how to actually program and actually implement a web-based information system, you get an F in the course. That's all there is to it. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I will fail you if you don't do your share of the group project, period. So I know that's a bit of a downer, but it is what it is. If you're a student who does their share of work on a group project, happy to have you. Welcome to the course. All right. So I guess I didn't come back to this page, but so today is September 14th, apparently, as you're watching this. I will fill in this table as I go. So that's where I started this week's lecture. So it's the start of that slide deck. This video that you're watching right now presumably will be linked there once it's sort of out there on YouTube. I will break this video. Well, I'll break each week up into approximately 2 pieces. One 3-hour video is probably too much. So I'll do something like, maybe a little bit less this week, but something like, an hour 15 or so, and then a break, and then another hour and 15 or so. So again, I'll fill those in as we go, each part. As an aside, the resolution that I can post a YouTube premiere is every 15 minutes. So I can't have a premiere start at 2:37. It starts at either 2:30 or 2:45. So I'll try to time things so that there's a 10-minute or so break in between. Some weeks I'll get that bang on, and some weeks I might be a little weird with how long the break is in between. Okay. I feel like I'm rusty, even though I was teaching last semester. I feel like somehow this is a whole new experience to be recording lectures. I don't know. I somehow lost my fitness or something. My stamina was decreased with a 3-week break. Anyway, So, like I said, I will fill this in as time goes on. I may edit, if I have to add something after the lecture, I will, but usually I don't. But mostly exactly what you will get if you go to the course webpage is what I'm talking about if you want to follow along. Okay, let's get into the actual, course part of the course. I'm not going to, in this, I don't think a fourth year computing science course is well served by, here's an opening tag, here's a closing tag, this is an entity or whatever. If you really haven't worked with HTML or CSS before, the Compute 160, the study guide for the distance ed version of Compute 165. I'm partial to it, but I'm not unbiased. I've always liked this web standards curriculum from the Mozilla organization is good. Actually, that's become a redirect. Anyway, I guess Mozilla's taken it over. The dive into HTML5 by Mark Pilgrim is also good. Again, if you really haven't worked with HTML before, good place to start. And I guess the same for CSS. I have some links there. If you haven't worked with those, I guess exercise 0 is do a tutorial and get some of that out of the way before exercise 1 comes along next week or so. What I'm going to do here, what I want to do is talk about the things that I see people do wrong, or that people who have sort of learned HTML and CSS, I don't know, informally, let's say, the lessons that people didn't get about what these tools are and how they can be used. The first thing is, I guess the World Wide Web is worldwide. The way people develop web pages, or again, I guess I'm saying here web pages, that's, maybe don't take my title for being too specific, right? By this, I mean web pages and web systems and web pages that are built by templates that are server-side or templates that are client-side, like all of these ways that HTML gets built and ends up in a web browser. That's what I mean by web pages in this context. I know how this happens, right? And I do it myself, right? When I'm creating web things, yeah, I have a computer and it's the one I'm typing at. It's the one that my text editor lives on. And I, double click the thing, or I open the localhost URL or whatever it is, and I test it in my browser on my computer, this one. Of course I do, because that's where I'm working. But of course, there's different browsers, and yeah, Chrome is dominant right now. What are we at here? Chrome is 2/3 or so. Yeah, Chrome is around 2/3 of usage, but well, if you design for only Chrome, are you willing to right off the top lose 1/3 of your audience or your customers? Probably not. So we probably need to deal with some reasonable subset of all the browsers and some reasonable subset of the versions that are out there. All the mainstream browsers now automatically update, so there's not nearly as much of a question of, well, what if I have Firefox version, whatever version of Firefox I have, 91, that's probably reasonably recent, because my computer hasn't been begging me to update anything. But what if I have 86? How different are things? Well, that's less of a problem than it has been in the past, but still. There's still a bit of a question of legacy Edge and legacy Internet Explorer. That's very quickly going away, but as of current recording, there's still IE users out there. Screen size, window size is another big question. So even now, as I sit here, my monitor setup is the one that I'm recording, that is a 16 by 9 or whatever, 1080p monitor, and then another one over there that, well, it has my OBS and stuff on it right now, but it's vertical. I use, when I'm working, most of the time, my email is on the wide monitor and my web browser is on the tall monitor. Most of the time, my browser window, is much more sort of this shape than what you're used to. Some web pages really freak out about that because I have a browser size that's wrong. Well, no, it's not wrong. It's my choice. And of course, I guess the other thing that's implicit there is size. That, you know, we all have this web browser as well, the phone-sized web browser or the tablet-sized web browser, or the laptop size versus the desktop size, right? I mean, I have a luxury of 2 screens here because I have a desktop setup. That's not the case for everybody. People forget about things like this. Like I always cringe a little bit when I see a web page that says click. Well, if you're on a phone, and of course a large fraction of your users are going to be on a phone, how do I see that here? Mobile versus tablet versus desktop. A lot of your users are not, and this is so in fact, like mobile usage, and I don't know what stat counter is measuring here, like whatever websites they measure, 57% of the users are mobile, less than half, 40% and change, are desktop users, and a few tablet users. Some of your users are clicking, some of your users are tapping. Keep that in mind. It's going to change the way that your interaction goes on a website. It's just going to be different stuff there. You know, how annoying is it to look at a PDF? Well, on my desktop, like 4 out of 10 annoying. On my phone, it's 8 out of 10 annoying. To, you know, if you decide you want to give me a PDF, that again depends on the user, and you need your site to work in all of these scenarios because all of these users are going to come along. It's just the way the modern web works. So we've got to do better than just it works in the one scenario where I've tested it. And there's obviously just, well, test it in other scenarios is one, I guess, obvious way to deal with that. Like, try it on your phone, try it on a different size screen, try it on a different browser. Like I keep both Firefox and Chrome around in my life, partially for that. I will look at Edge and a Windows VM if I need to here and there. So what I'm sort of leading into here is some of the things that I think are good things to think about, good tools to have, good thoughts to have in your head to, you know, how do we do better? How do we make sure our website, web page, web app works in the sort of widest possible variety of scenarios? Because you can't test them all, right? You're not going to be able to test every possible screen and phone and window size with every possible browser that can be installed in any of those scenarios. You can try some, and you should try a good variety, but how do you convince yourself things are going to work a little more broadly? So the robustness principle that seems to have been first written down by John Postel in RFC 761, which I believe is like TCP. Like it's the description of TCP as an internet protocol, apparently in 1980. Be conservative in what you send, be liberal in what you receive, I think is the way I will rephrase that. So again, I guess the original context here is, you know, network packets and stuff, right? Where when you're sending out a packet, you want to be very careful that every bit is sort of exactly where it needs to be and expressing exactly the right information about your whatever you're sending. But when you're receiving, on the receiving side, you sort of do your best to be as flexible as possible. To say, well, okay, I received this packet, and this, you know, the spec says that these 4 bits should all be 0, but one of them's a 1. You probably should ignore that on receive. So, of course, the idea here is compatibility, right? If we're all doing this, all of our web pages, all of our network packets, all of our whatever we're talking about should work. The reason I bring that up in this context is web browsers do their part. In this context, web browsers are receivers. They're taking HTML and CSS and whatever from you, from the developer, and trying to display it, as a web page, as this. So people that make web browsers know what they're doing. They will try to display things that are not quite perfect HTML style sheets, whatever. The problem is the number of people that make web browsers is very small, and they understand their role in this game. The number of people who make web pages is very large. Many of them don't understand the game that's being played here. So, I mean, my expectation, I think your expectation of yourself should be that when you're producing HTML, and again, this applies equally to if you're creating HTML and just like in a text file, as I'll do in a few minutes here, or if you're creating HTML with a template, or if you're building HTML dynamically on the client side, like all of those things are web pages as far as I'm concerned. All of them are constructed of HTML. This applies to all of them. You need to be fairly careful and fairly rule following with that. And the same thing applies, I haven't talked about CSS and JavaScript yet, but same thing applies. All of these things, you should be careful with what you produce and, follow the rules as much as possible because you want your stuff to work as widely as possible. All right, so how do we do that? Well, let's look at an HTML reference here. I have one. In fact, I have what, as far as I'm concerned, is the one, the Mozilla HTML reference. If we look at the content that's here, I don't know, something like EM, DFN for defined term. These things don't say anything or very much about appearance. There's a few legacy ones that do say things about appearance, but let's ignore those. Well, let's ignore the legacy things as well. There's nothing in the tag site for, let's see, to describe a reference, let's title, maybe something. There's nothing in this description that says anything about appearance. And that's because HTML itself isn't about appearance, it's about meaning. It's a semantic markup language, and semantic is, to do with meaning, to do with the purpose. What is this piece of content? What's it for? What does it mean? I guess directly what semantic is about. So the implication there is if you have, I guess, an abbreviation or acronym, well, there's a tag for that. And you should use, if you have this piece of content, you should use the tag that goes with it. And for the moment, I don't care how it looks. And I guess if you know what CSS is, you know the punchline to why I'm not going to care about appearance right now, and I'm going to worry about it later. So what that means for me, and I think, again, for HTML in general, if you have a paragraph, it should be wrapped up in the paragraph tag. And if you have a paragraph tag, what it contains should be a paragraph. It's an if and only if kind of operation. Again, DFN, I saw it back here a minute ago. Term being defined in the context of a phrase or sentence. So in fact, I did that. I saw that right back here. This is a newly defined term, right? So I bet, okay, it's not, it's going to be challenging to get on the screen there, but if I look at this thing, yeah, I used a DFN element for it because it's a newly defined term. And that's why I use that element. In a style sheet, I decided it should look a certain way. So there's this like all of a sudden, it's not enough to know that like EM exists or that strong exists. You have to know this part over here. The contents have strong importance, seriousness, or urgency. Okay, well, if I have contents that have strong importance, seriousness, or urgency, if and only if, I should use the strong element for it. Or they should be in a strong element. So that means you have to know maybe a little bit more about this HTML reference. And again, even if you have been a developer, you've done web work before, I suspect that there's going to be a lot more, meaning, a lot more sort of, again, semantics to those HTML tags than you have really thought about. Maybe you should. There's a lot of bad HTML, web in general, documentation and references and tutorials out there. If you're using W3 schools, just stop. Go to the Mozilla Developer Network. I don't want to hate specifically on W3 schools, but boy, if you want to be just, very rarely are things there wrong, but if you want to be subtly misled into bad habits, W3 schools is the place to go very often. The Mozilla Developer Network, which is what I've been sort of clicking around at back here, is very much more sort of principled in the information they give is very, very good and very accurate, and again, not misleading in general. This is the reference you want for HTML. So here's my challenge. Here's another assignment that doesn't have any marks associated with it. Read this, maybe not cover to cover, but I'm willing to bet. I don't know, some of you are going to be, or think of yourselves at least as very experienced web developers. Some of you are going to be relatively new. I don't care who you are. There's going to be stuff in here that you didn't know exists or you forgot about. Did you know that the KBD element is there that represents user input? So I guess if you're creating a tutorial, or instructions on how to use a thing or whatever, you might write, opening paragraph tag. When the dialog box appears, type KBD element, okay. If it's something the user has to type or say or, tap or whatever, I guess that's what the keyboard element is for. So by default, it's, I guess, in a monospace font, but of course, style sheets will let us modify that as we feel like. So, okay, maybe you're smart and you thought, you definitely knew that the keyboard tag exists. Did you know, where did it go? I swear I saw it there. Did you know the time element exists? And I guess, we can click through here because there's always example of how it works. If you have a date time sort of content, you can have the human readable version of the date time as contents of the time element, but then there's this date time property where you can give a machine readable version of that content, which all of a sudden now you have something that could be like automatically linked to somebody's calendar if the browser was smart enough, or if you had some JavaScript widget that was smart enough to find it and say, okay, well, we'll turn, every time we see a time with a sufficiently precise date time attribute, we'll turn that magically into a calendar invite, or we'll give the user the option for that, or whatever else. Any one of 1,000 ways you could use that information as soon as it's there in a machine readable way. If we were in person in a room, I would say, put up your hands. How many people knew that the time element exists? And if you knew it exists, do you use it? Do you remember when if you have some HTML template that is producing a list of dates or times or, again, events that are happening that you're pulling from a database, do you remember to actually put the time element around it and have the ISO, 8601 representation of that date time and then the human readable as contents. Did you? Did you do it or did you not? And I bet the answer is you didn't, because most people don't, because it's easier to not. Maybe I should do an example. I have an editor here somewhere. I had an editor here somewhere. Oh, there, I closed it. Good for me. So this, by the way, is this empty HTML5 page. That's this. Like this is literally, and honestly, half the reason I have it on the course website is so I can find it myself. This is how I start. You know, when I have a web page to make, if I am just making a sort of web page by hand. Again, here's another one. Do you remember to say this is an English page? You can tell because I'm writing English in it. So this lang attribute, it doesn't change the appearance usually, generally, mostly, but it's a useful thing. Google could take that and do something useful with it. That's handy. So, you know, what was that thing I said before? So I don't know if, I mean, should enter, like maybe enter should be, I don't know. Like this is a bit of a judgment call in my mind. Is enter, it's one key press as opposed to something you type. I don't know if I would use a keyboard element there or not. Let's say I'm not. Okay, so like I'm not sure I'm thrilled with the default style for the KBD element. The font's a little wacky, a little small, but I can change that in a style sheet, and I suppose I will later. So if you're lucky on, you know, an individual, you know, each piece of content as you go, you will go through the reference, or you'll go through your sort of mental version of the reference. Here's one I bet you didn't know. Did you know these Ruby annotations for like phonetics? Like Ruby annotate, like this is not Ruby the programming language, or I guess Ruby the Jewel. It's Ruby the, I don't know, scheme for pronunciation guides of in languages where pronunciation is not as obvious. Not to say it's super obvious in English. So what does that look like? So again, the idea here is that I have a block that has these pronunciation hints. This is the main content, and then this is the phonetics, the transcription, I suppose, is probably what the T stands for. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, okay. So Firefox, as of now, in its default style sheet, actually does kind of render that reasonably. Cool. Good job, Firefox. It didn't, but I'm willing to bet you didn't know that one exists, because I've never seen this tag in the wild. It seems like a very niche use case to put in HTML, but hey, there it is. So, you know, I will sometimes, I have done this in the, I guess in probably more likely 165. I believe. Oh, actually, wait, we're not done yet, are we? So, is the language code for Japanese JP or JA? I'd hate to make a mistake in lecture. JA. See, I would have got that wrong. Okay. Okay, I can also say what language that's in. Does it change the appearance? No, I think no. But you know, I might get a right-click option to translate that into English. I think I would in Chrome, but I don't in Firefox. So you you take your tags where you find them. Again, like sorry, the example I cut myself off on there was, I've done this in the past. Like, here's a recipe, right? So here's a list of ingredients. Here are the steps that you have to follow. So the list of ingredients are not an ordered list. You don't have to buy your ingredients in a certain order. That's probably an unordered list. The list of steps that you have to follow, add these two things together, it's the first one, and then stir, and then whatever, that's an ordered list. You do have to follow those steps in the right order. So you choose the right list element for the meaning of the content that you've got, which means you have to think a little bit about the content you've got. What's it all about? Why is it? Why do I want it to look different than the surrounding text? That's the easy case. Sometimes it's not specific enough. So, this is an example I use because it comes up a lot in my life, where I have pages with variously different kinds of code, right? So code is computer code. It's an inline element, where you can say things like, well, I guess if I just have some kind of code, I would do something like this. And that will look like code. Again, there's some default style that the browser has for the code element. I might want to be more specific, and I might want to be more specific because I'm about to do something in a style sheet. I might want to be more specific just because I want more specificity. I just want to be more careful with my semantics. So the class attribute is there to, I guess, create a subcategory almost. You should try to insert some meaning there as well. So this is a code I might do for that. I don't know. I guess it's not that different. Probably maybe that's the Java equivalent. So now if I want to, I can grab hold of these two things separately in a style sheet, or with some JavaScript code, I can go and find them, or whatever it is I'm doing. And it's almost like a sub tag. I have code elements, but then I have the kind that are class equals Python, or the kind that are class equals Java. That is just a string. So this is sort of some string that means something to me. It can be whatever I need it to be. Short as long, it's basically an identifier. It's almost like a variable name, with possibly hyphens in it. But then again, when it comes time later, I can be more specific. And I guess in these lecture slides, and now that I look at it, I have HTML code is red, like subtly red. It's kind of a dark red there, if you can see it. When I get to some CSS code, that my code class equals CSS is colored differently, just so you can sort of see at a glance which is which. So I mentioned both class and ID as attributes here. If I want to be a little bit more precise, I can also use ID to sort of say, well, here's a sub instance of paragraph. Here's a specific paragraph. And the difference is it's sort of singular versus plural. IDs have to be unique. So if I say ID equals Ruby example, or ID equals menu, or whatever, I only get to say that once on a page. So an ID is an identifier, right? That's, I guess, why it's called ID. It does have to be unique within the page. So you can look it up uniquely as in style sheet. You can also, in JavaScript, very easily just say the one thing with ID equals menu, because the rules are it has to be unique. For class, it can be used many times. So again, it's a unique one versus a subgroup, I guess, which is why I said this. You know, I might have several examples of Python code or Java code. So this is fine, right? If I have more than one code class equals Python, that's fine. If I'd used ID there, I've done something wrong. That's going to be an error. We'll talk about what error means there in a little bit. So yeah, and you sort of pause and you think to yourself, well, why do I want to distinguish this thing? Is it because, you know, maybe it's because I want to grab hold of it in a style sheet? Well, is it a thing that's unique? If I might have several of them, it's a class. You know, I'm sort of assuming here that I only have one menu on my page. It's unique. It can be an ID. I guess the other thing that IDs do, just as an aside, if I look at the HTML for this page, oops. I have, okay, so things like this, I have ID equals making pages. That can also be used as a fragment. So I can say here like number sign that, and it refers to that position in the page. And what, I mean, you can see what the web browser does is it scrolls to that position in the page when it first gets opened up. So that's another use for an ID, and I guess another hint about like why might it have to be unique? Well, if I have two things with ID equals making pages, what the heck does that mean when I use it as a fragment in a URL like that? So I guess you might notice there, like I tend to do that like every heading or section, depending how the page is getting organized, I tend to have an ID on it because, well, I or somebody else might want to refer to that specific part of the page, and I can this way. Okay. God, how am I going to arrange my breaks here? I guess I'll do an hour 15. Yeah, so I'll do another 10 minutes or so, and then I'll take a break, I guess. I wish I'd looked at the time 2 or 3 minutes ago. I could have taken a break there. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I'll try to aim for about a 10-minute break in between the two halves of the lecture, just so you can sort of collect your thoughts and go get a snack, go to the bathroom, whatever it is. Okay, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, I don't edit these. This is as live as an in-person lecture because ain't nobody got time to edit 3 hours of video a week. Okay. So what happens when? So you think, well, okay, I have this thing on my page, or I'm going to have this kind of content on my site or in my application or whatever. I'm going to want to grab a hold of it with a style sheet or refer to it with CSS or with JavaScript or whatever. Okay, what kind of content is it? I look through the list, and I look through the list, and I look through the list, and I can't find anything that fits. So yeah, something longer. And again, this is one that comes up for me. If I'm going to do something like this, how do I mark this up? This multi-line example of computer code. The code element itself is inline, so it's expecting to sort of be part of a paragraph or part of a heading or part of a section, or no, smaller than section. Yeah, paragraph, heading, well, block quote, which is where I'm heading, or whatever it is. So this isn't the right markup, or at least not enough complete markup for this code, because it's a block, it's not inline. So I need something wrapped around it. But, well, that's not a paragraph. You know, if I think back to what that teacher said in grade 6 about paragraphs, this isn't one. So this isn't the right markup. And there's really nothing in the reference here that is like block of code. And then, so another one, you know, once in a while, if you do want to like change languages mid paragraph or mid text, it's just a convention in English that if you are switching languages like that, the other language gets italicized. So this little like French snippet, or if you have a little Latin quote or whatever, it would be italicized just for visual separation. But of course, you also want to mark that up. I would want to, I don't know, in a paragraph here, like presumably, again, I'm writing some paragraph here. I want to mark this up, and I want to mark it up for a couple reasons. Again, one, so I can get a hold of it with a style sheet. Another reason I want to mark it up is so I can do this. It's French. I want to say that, again, some automatic translation could be offered or whatever else. What I would probably do, and honestly, this is, I think, what I would do, and probably what I've done in the lecture slides for something like this, is I could say, well, it's kind of like a quote. And again, I go to the reference here and I find block quote. This is an extended quotation, usually indented, or like the default style sheets will generally indent it. Okay. Oh, I still have I have a line breaking problem there. We'll come back to that, but that's fine. Is this really a quote? I guess it's I'm kind of quoting my like .py file. So I don't think that's wrong. A bit of a judgment call about whether that's the right markup for that. But sometimes you need something else. So these two generic tags, div and span, are for this purpose. It's I can't find anything else that fits. I've looked, you know, the sort of, I don't know, the thought process you should go through here is I've gone through the HTML reference or my mental copy of the HTML reference. There's not really a tag for this concept, block example of code, or inline language change. I have these generic tags because sometimes content just doesn't fit. So I also might do that. That I think is perfectly good markup. Div and span should always be accompanied by a meaningful class or ID, because again, I'm trying to squeeze some meaning into my markup here as much as possible. And so the difference is div is block level. So like paragraph and heading and unordered list and ordered list, they're things that sort of you would imagine are going to stack vertically, right? So one paragraph is going to be below the previous paragraph. And then if there's a heading, it's going to be below that. If you have inline content like an ahref or link or em or code, that's inline, and you expect it to be part of a block level thing, part of a heading, part of a paragraph, part of a list item or whatever. So span is the inline generic and div is the block level generic. So that's the kind of code I would use for that. Div and span on their own don't look like much. Div looks pretty much like a paragraph in the default style that most browsers have. Span looks like nothing happened. There's no style associated with it. Just looks like any other inline text. But now I have something, well, one, I have more meaning in my content. You know, sometimes like when creating markup, the sort of game that I sometimes play with myself is like, how much meaning can I squeeze into the HTML? Maybe think of this as machine readable, right? So the text, I mean, you know, if you've taken a natural language processing course, processing the text is hard. Processing this and realizing I have a paragraph that contains some Python code, well, that's something we can all imagine doing. Or we can imagine maybe Google doing when it indexes the page, right? It can extract more meaning from the content in a nicely beautiful machine readable way that's easy for it. Maybe we want to make it easy for, again, the search engine or whatever other automated processing tool comes along. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, I do. I kind of, well, I wonder what I do. Actually, okay, so let me pause here. What do I do in the actual slides? Okay, I've used the pre-element for this. So pre takes care of the spacing problem. So inside of pre, the line break and the spaces are honored and not modified. And then I've said I have a class that says what language it is, and I have this data lang attribute for some reason. It's been a while since I thought about why I marked up my slides the way I did. That was a choice I made at the time. Again, it's not like there's one right answer here. I think that is also a reasonable answer. Yeah, I guess I didn't kind of complete this example, did I? I said all spans should have a meaningful class or ID. So this span is, I'm changing languages here, right? So the reason for this span element to exist is I have a fragment of text that is in another language. And okay, I can include this little bit of semantics as well for which language is it. And then I can worry about some style sheet work in a little while. Maybe I'll go with this. I think that's probably a little cleaner markup. Now, a div, like I said, by default, it looks like a paragraph. I get all the default like white space collapsing that HTML does. So the fact that there's a new line in the code doesn't matter. The fact that there's 4 spaces in the code doesn't matter. They all end up looking like a single space. Well, we can get there with a style sheet, but for now, I don't care. My markup looks good. My markup looks meaningful. I think that's all right. Okay. I think that's a good place for a break. So I'm going to stop here. You will find a link to the second video in this spot. Once it exists, I will, again, like I said, I'll continue to fill in this table as lectures go on and as I record and upload. So head over to that second video. It'll start in 10 or 12 minutes, and we'll pick up from there. See you in a little bit.